Welcome back, everyone, to MorningLine. Nick Barris here on a Thursday. We're not open phones Thursday. We have a guest, obviously. This is a local attorney, immigration attorney Elliot Osment, with us this morning. As you see, we're talking about immigration concerns, hearing his point of view on it, because he's been very much in the middle of litigation in the past, and I think he's anticipating more in the future, representing many of these immigrants on a variety of issues that will come up. And things are changing in the law, as we see with the Trump administration. We can take your calls at 737-7587 if you'd like to join in the conversation, ask a question of Elliot, or just voice an opinion. Let's go next to Charlie. Charlie, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Nick.
Hi, Charlie. What's on your mind?
Oh, I was just thinking about this immigration thing, and I was going to tell you I had a dream one night, and I seen in that dream, I seen lots of people coming in, especially Muslims. They were coming up through Mexico and also from across the water over in Asia and around. And they were going up to Washington, and they were getting positions in our government.
Well, I'll tell you, maybe he's bringing up this aspect of it. A lot of people do fear some of the influx of people, especially maybe, with some of these refugees. They fear that terrorists will be sneaking in amongst them. And so I think that maybe is one thing Donald Trump is looking at. I don't know how that applies to the border with Mexico, but you hear that time and again. And people fear that.
Well, there's really no rationale for that fear.
At least not yet.
Not yet. To my knowledge, we have never had a terrorist attack from a Muslim that was admitted through the refugee program. Now, we have had some people of Muslim faith who have been radicalized, but those are either U.S. citizens or people who were legally living in the United States. Mm-hmm. We have never had a Syrian refugee or a Muslim refugee carry out a terrorist attack in the United States.
And the president wants it to remain that way, and that's why we're hearing, among other things, he may put delays on some of the refugees coming in to further vet them. But as you say, it hasn't happened yet. Of course, the goal is to keep it from ever happening, I suppose. Let's take another call from Timothy. Timothy, good morning.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Tim.
What I would like to, I guess, my kind of a question as well. I don't understand why there's always a letting in of other countries when, we could do more to help that country have their own home to stay. I would think that most people would want to stay in their home area. The infrastructure is, to me, our infrastructure here to hold all these folks, and, it's dwindling, in my opinion. Mm-hmm.
No, I hear you. That's a fair question, and I don't know how it's changed some, but maybe, obviously, Elliot, you've dealt with many who've come up from Mexico. Some of them have gone back. In general, when you ask them, why is it they come to the United States?
Well, many of them that have been here for a while will admit to me, especially if they're from Mexico, that they did not come up here because they feared for their lives. They came up here because they were looking for a better life. Mm-hmm. Many people don't realize that in the early 2000s, we were undergoing an economic boom, beginning with the election of George W. Bush, mm-hmm. and continuing for 3 or 4 years. Corporations and businesses, especially in the construction business, were desperate for workers.
Elliot, do you remember this? There was a very prominent building here in Nashville that was in the process of being built right around the time you said, and maybe a little bit before that, and ICE came in and did a raid, and it put the construction of that building back.
It stopped it.
It stopped it, and people were freaking out, and it was because they had hired a lot of these workers who ICE cleaned up. I see where your point's going then. A lot of these folks were coming up for the work because of the boom, and a lot of the buildings that we have here were built probably in some ways more affordably because of this work that came out.
And what was happening on the border was the word came down, our constituency, it was a Republican constituency, mm-hmm. corporations and construction companies, were saying we are desperate for workers. And so at that point in time, I've heard reports where hundreds of migrants from Mexico were being waved through. They weren't even checking credentials. They were waving them through. and letting them scatter to the four winds of the United
States. Because
States.
they need the workforce.
They needed
for
the
what
workforce.
they were doing. You hear all along a lot of times people saying sometimes, look, these illegals are coming in and they're taking our jobs. So were these not jobs that Americans could have, I guess they weren't finding people to take these jobs?
I think at that time there were not enough U.S. citizen workers filling those jobs. And I don't have statistics with me that would show that. But there was a labor shortage in the construction trades. Now, we've heard a lot of people complain about these people taking U.S. citizen jobs. The experience has been the opposite. For example, the state of Alabama, about 3 or 4 years ago, passed a law in the state legislature that made it illegal for farmers or anyone else to hire these agricultural workers. And what happened as soon as that passed, it was such a severe law that all the immigrant workers that were working on these farms in Alabama left. They just stopped working the next day, all of a sudden. And they did not go to work because they were afraid of raids by state law enforcement people. And what happened was the farmers, especially tomato farmers, lost their entire crop that year.
So what you're saying is there weren't Americans ready to jump in and take those jobs?
Exactly. They tried. They tried to find the workers to come, and they weren't there. And I remember working when I was just a little boy on my grandfather's tobacco farm. And that is back-breaking work, I remember. And that was his biggest crop. So I know how back-breaking that is. And we have a need for those workers that's going to go unfilled. The end of the Alabama story is that as soon as the legislature in Alabama could get back into the Capitol, they passed a repeal of that law. But the damage had already been done for that year. The tomato crop was devastated.
Well, they were hearing from the farmers and others.
And it cost the tomato farmers in Alabama millions and millions of dollars.
On that note, we'll take a break. When we come back, Turl and others who are on hold, stay there. We'll hear from you. Take more of your calls as we talk immigration issues right now with Elliot Osment, local immigration attorney, right after this. Stay with us.
This is a Storm 5 HD weather update.